My commercial landlord tried to screw my client over, so I taught him that revenge has consequences. Hi Reddit. This happened a long time ago, long enough that most of the players have either retired, moved on, or quietly disappeared from the city's business circles. But it's still my favorite story to tell when someone says, "You can't beat a landlord." You can. You just can't beat him the way he expects. The best revenge isn't loud. It isn't illegal. It doesn't even look like revenge at first. It's structural. And it's served cold. When this happened, I was in my early 30s. Young enough to still be underestimated. Old enough to have already learned something important. If you can't win physically, you win structurally. I figured that out in high school. I wasn't small, but I wasn't imposing either. I was the kid who read too much and talked too fast. I didn't win arguments by volume. I won them by noticing what other people missed. There was a guy in my sophomore year, big, loud, always testing people. He liked pushing kids into lockers. He liked public humiliation. He liked dominance. One day he tried it with me. I didn't fight him. I didn't report him. I didn't posture. I found out he was cheating in chemistry. Not on a big scale. Just copying lab answers from someone smarter. I mentioned it casually within earshot of the teacher. Not as an accusation. As confusion. "Hey, I thought you said you didn't do the lab yesterday?" That was it. He got caught. He got suspended. He never touched me again. That was the first time I understood something fundamental. You can't outmuscle a bully. But you can outposition him. That's probably why I ended up in law. In courtrooms, strength doesn't win. Structure wins. And bullies hate structure. By the time this story begins, I was sharing office space with an older lawyer named Aaron. Aaron was brilliant, charming, and ethically flexible. He had a Rolodex full of guys. If you needed someone who knew someone, Aaron knew him. We rented space in a commercial building downtown. The landlord was exactly the type of man who gravitates toward commercial property ownership. Large, red-faced, impatient, convinced that ownership equaled superiority. He believed intimidation was negotiation. In commercial leasing, landlords often have far more leverage than residential landlords. In many jurisdictions, if you're late on rent or in breach of your lease, the landlord doesn't need a court order to evict you. He changes the locks. That's it. You show up to work, and your key doesn't turn. That power attracts a certain psychology. And this man had it. He threatened lockouts constantly. Tenants fell behind, threatened to change the locks. Dispute over maintenance, threatened to change the locks. Snow removal disagreement, lockout. Most tenants folded. Because litigation costs money. And small businesses don't have money to burn. In the basement of our building was a restaurant called The Vault. It had once been a bank. The vault was still there. Not decorative. Not a prop. An actual reinforced, steel-lined, pre-war bank vault weighing close to 100 tons. The restaurant owner, let's call him Marco, had leaned into the aesthetic. He set tables inside the vault chamber. Diners ate surrounded by old safety deposit boxes. It was moody, atmospheric, unforgettable, and busy. Marco ran a tight operation. He worked 12-hour days. He knew his margins down to the dollar. Restaurants are fragile ecosystems. If your food costs rise 5%, you feel it immediately. If foot traffic dips for a month, you bleed. He wasn't getting rich. He was surviving. That matters. One afternoon, I was halfway through a carbonara when Marco leaned in close. "The landlord's going to ruin me," he said quietly. "That narrows it down to everyone in the building," I replied. He didn't laugh. He handed me a letter. It was 3 pages long. Retroactive charges for snow removal from 6 winters ago, parking lot repairs, common area flooring, electrical upgrades, administrative property costs total demanded, $118,742, due in 10 business days, or he'd change the locks. Marco's annual net profit was around $85,000 on a good year. That demand alone could wipe out his operating cushion. But it wasn't the worst part. He slid the lease across the table. "Look at page 73, he said. Page 73. That's where the vault lived. Commercial leases are not friendly documents. They are drafted by landlords, negotiated by experienced counsel, and assumed to bind sophisticated parties. Marco's lease wasn't a simple agreement. It was a renewal of an assignment of a renewal of the original lease from the late 1940s, when the building had still been a bank. The original tenant had installed the vault, and the lease clause, preserved through decades of lazy renewals, stated, at the end of the lease term, the tenant must remove the vault and restore the premises to pre-installation condition. Pre-installation, meaning demolish reinforced flooring, remove 100 tons of steel, rebuild structural support, restore foundation integrity. I made some calls the next morning. The engineering estimate came back between $750,000 and $1.2 million. Marco's entire business, equipment, goodwill, everything might fetch $400,000 if he was lucky. And then I hit the final page. Personal guarantee. He wasn't just liable as a corporate entity. He had personally guaranteed the lease. If the company defaulted, the landlord could come after his home, his savings, his retirement. This wasn't a bad clause. It was catastrophic. Marco looked at me. I'm screwed, right? Another commercial lawyer had already told him yes. Legally, the case was ugly. The lease was clear. The guarantee was enforceable. Litigation would cost 6 figures before trial. Even if he won on the retroactive charges, the vault clause was real. I didn't answer him immediately. Let me take the lease, I said. He nodded. I'll call you tomorrow. That night, I spread the lease across my kitchen table. 78 pages. I read it twice. There was no clean escape clause. No drafting error. No procedural mistake. Just an ancient obligation waiting to explode. I slept on it. Literally. The lease was still open on the table when I left for work the next morning. The idea didn't arrive in my office. It arrived on the street. I was walking to court, irritated, thinking about leverage. Commercial landlords operate on one thing: asset optimization. They squeeze tenants because they want maximum return on square footage. And then I passed a building with a brand new for lease sign. Former credit union. Vacant. Glass frontage. Reinforced floors. Security upgrades visible. And I stopped. Banks. Credit unions. Financial institutions. They like vaults. Not decorative vaults. Real ones. The kind you don't have to install. And that's when it clicked. The landlord didn't want the vault removed because it was valuable. He wanted it removed because it was a liability. If Marco removed it, it would cost Marco $1 million. If Marco left it, it became the landlord's problem. But what if the landlord believed the vault increased the property's value? What if he believed he had a tenant lined up who specifically needed it? What if his greed outweighed his caution? Bullies rely on leverage. But greed blinds leverage. I smiled in the middle of the sidewalk. That was the moment. Not when Marco handed me the lease. Not when I read the guarantee. When I saw a for lease sign on a former bank. Structure. Position. Greed. That's how you beat a bully. I went back to the office and told Aaron, I need a real estate agent. And that's when things got interesting. When I walked back into the office that morning, Aaron was already in. Aaron had practiced law for almost 40 years. He had a talent for reading people, an even greater talent for bending situations, and a complete lack of concern for professional optics. Why are you smiling? He asked. I need a real estate agent. I said. You buying something? No. Selling something? No. He leaned back in his chair. You're about to do something questionable. Questionable isn't illegal, I said. Aaron laughed. That's what I used to tell the Law Society. He opened his old Rolodex, an actual physical one, and flipped through it with the care of someone browsing a wine list. I know a guy, he said finally. Aaron always knew a guy. The agent's name was Daniel. Mid-40s. Polished. Ambitious. The kind of man who wore expensive suits but still hustled for mid-tier commercial listings. I met him in his office that afternoon. He assumed I was looking to buy or lease space. I need you to create interest in a commercial property, I said. Yours? No. He paused. That complicates things. It won't, I said calmly. I need you to present a serious expression of interest to a landlord. High monthly rent. Strong tenant profile. But with one specific condition. He leaned forward. What's the catch? The vault. He blinked. The what? I explained the building. The basement restaurant. The 100-ton bank vault. The lease clause requiring removal. Daniel listened carefully. You're trying to make him keep it, he said slowly. Yes. And why would he? Because he'll think it increases value. Daniel smiled slightly. Now he understood. Here's where most people misunderstand commercial law. If a tenant installs a fixture, something permanently attached to a building, the lease usually defines whether it must be removed at the end of term. In this case, the vault predated Marco. But through sloppy renewals, the obligation to remove it had transferred to him. If Marco left it behind without permission, the landlord could sue him for breach and force removal, or claim damages equal to the removal cost. But if the landlord claimed ownership of the vault, if he asserted it was part of the building, then it became his asset, his responsibility, his liability, and that's what I needed in writing. The landlord's ego would help me get it. Daniel and I built the story carefully. The fictional tenant would be a regional financial services group, looking to expand, seeking a secure downtown location. Interested specifically because of the existing vault, we drafted a letter of intent. Important detail. An LOI in commercial leasing is typically non-binding. It expresses serious interest. It outlines rent, term, improvements, but it does not create a final lease unless a formal agreement is signed. That distinction would save us later. The proposed rent? 20% above market. For 10 years. To a landlord who squeezed every dollar from tenants. That number would shine like gold. Condition number 1. The vault must remain intact and available for operational use. Condition number 2. Landlord confirms full ownership of the vault structure. Daniel looked at me. This is aggressive. Is it inaccurate? No. Is it fraudulent? No. Is it unethical? He hesitated. Gray. I smiled. Gray is where structure lives. But before we sent the LOI, I needed something else. I went back to Marco. We sat in the vault room after closing. He looked tired. You have something? He asked. I might, I said. But you need to trust me. He laughed weakly. At this point, what's left to lose? You're going to make a demand. A demand? Against him? Yes. You've met him, right? Yes. And he's predictable. I drafted a formal letter on Marco's behalf. It stated, due to relocation plans, Marco required removal of all tenant fixtures, including the vault. He demanded written confirmation that the landlord would allow removal within 7 business days. Marco stared at me. You want me to ask him to let me take the vault? Yes. That's insane. Not if you want him to refuse. Marco understood slowly. You think he'll say no. I think he won't be able to resist saying no. We didn't wait long. The landlord happened to be at the restaurant a few days later. I approached him directly. I represent Marco, I said. We need confirmation regarding removal of the vault. He wiped his hands on a napkin and laughed. Remove it? That vault stays. I'll need that in writing, I said. You lawyers, he snorted. Fine, I'll send it. He did. The letter was short. It asserted the vault was integral to the premises. Could not be removed. It was effectively part of the landlord's property. There it was. Ownership claimed. In writing. The trap was half set. Now Daniel sent the letter of intent. Polished. Professional. Serious. The proposed tenant was very interested, but required assurance that the vault would remain. Confirmation that it was landlord-owned. Access for inspection. The rent offer was bold. Higher than any tenant in the building. 10-year term. Minimal improvement allowance. To a greedy landlord, this looked like victory. He had a chance to rent the basement at premium rates. Because of the vault. the same vault he had just claimed ownership of. The landlord didn't respond immediately. He requested a meeting with Daniel. Daniel played it perfectly, interested but cautious. "We're serious," he told the landlord. "But the vault is non-negotiable." The landlord assured him it was part of the building. Daniel requested written confirmation. He got it. Again. Now we had two documents. One refusing Marco removal rights. One affirming landlord ownership. Marco moved out at the end of the month. He left the vault. Exactly as required. No breach. No removal. Just compliance with landlord's instruction. And then we waited. Because greed takes time to collapse. The funny thing about greedy people is that they don't think they're greedy. They think they're smart. They think they're aggressive negotiators. They think they're optimizing assets. They think everyone else is just too soft. And that's exactly what makes them predictable. Within a week of receiving Daniel's letter of intent, the landlord stopped harassing Marco entirely. No more retroactive snow removal charges. No more lockout threats. No more escalating letters. Silence. That told me everything. The landlord believed he had won something bigger. To him, Marco was yesterday's problem. The future was a 10-year lease at 20% above market rent. He had already mentally spent that money. Daniel kept me informed after each interaction. "The landlord is eager," he told me during one phone call. "Eager how?" "He wants to fast-track this. He says the space is highly desirable." I laughed at that. The basement had been vacant once before for nearly a year. No natural light. Limited street visibility. And, of course, a 100-ton steel vault embedded in the floor. Highly desirable wasn't the phrase I'd use. But now it was a unique asset. Because someone had told him it was. Daniel scheduled a walkthrough. The landlord personally unlocked the basement. He walked Daniel through the space proudly. "The vault is the centerpiece," he reportedly said. "Banks would kill for this." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Security infrastructure like this is rare," he agreed. "Flattery is currency." The landlord showed him the reinforced walls, the steel door, the locking mechanism. Daniel asked the question we needed asked. "Just to confirm, the vault is part of the landlord's property, correct? No tenant claims." "Absolutely," the landlord replied. "It stays." He followed that up in writing. Again, every confirmation strengthened the structural shift. Originally, the vault was Marco's liability. Now, by assertion, it was the landlord's asset. Ownership claimed. Responsibility assumed. In commercial law, words matter, especially written ones. For about 3 weeks, everything moved forward. Daniel requested draft lease terms. The landlord provided them. Daniel requested minor adjustments. The landlord agreed quickly. Too quickly. He wanted the deal. He wanted it badly. Daniel sent a draft lease intentionally incomplete. He marked it, "subject to execution of formal agreement." That phrase is crucial. It means, nothing is binding yet. The landlord either didn't understand the nuance, or chose not to. Greed often overrides caution. Meanwhile, Marco was packing. I stopped by the restaurant during its final week. The tables were stacked. The kitchen half dismantled. The staff quiet. "Are we safe?" he asked me privately. "Yes." "You're sure?" "Yes." "But he's got that letter." "Yes." "And that offer." "Yes." And he thinks he's winning." Marco didn't smile. He had too much on the line. If this failed, he wasn't just out a restaurant. He was out his house, his savings, his future. The vault removal clause alone could wipe him out personally. This wasn't clever gamesmanship. It was survival. The final step required restraint. Daniel requested one more walkthrough, this time with a representative from the financial institution. There was no institution. There was no representative. There was just Daniel and a well-dressed associate pretending to take notes. They asked technical questions about structural load-bearing capacity, insurance implications, access for armored transport. The landlord answered confidently. Because now the vault wasn't a liability. It was leverage. He imagined the building housing a regional credit union. He imagined long-term rent. He imagined prestige. He had already mentally erased Marco. That's the part bullies always miss. They move on too quickly. They assume the weaker party disappears quietly. Then Daniel went quiet. 2 days passed. 3, 5. The landlord began calling him. Voicemail. Polite emails at first. Then slightly impatient ones. Daniel returned the call on day 7. "I'm afraid the board decided to pursue another location," he said calmly. "They found a property with easier street access." The landlord was furious. "But we were ready to sign. We were subject to formal execution," Daniel reminded him. "There was no binding agreement. There it is again. Structure. He had no contract, no executed lease, no enforceable commitment, just a letter of intent, which clearly stated it was non-binding." The deal evaporated. 2 days later, I saw the landlord in the hallway. His face was redder than usual. "I know this was you," he said. "I don't know what you mean," I replied evenly. "That offer, that agent, the vault. You claimed ownership," I reminded him. His jaw tightened. "You tricked me." "No," I said calmly. "You made a decision. And that's the truth. I didn't force him to refuse Marco's removal demand. I didn't force him to assert ownership in writing. I didn't force him to chase a premium lease. He did that. Greed did that. I just built the mirror. He threatened, of course. "I'll sue you. I'll sue the restaurant. I'll sue that agent." But sue for what? There was no signed lease, no binding agreement, no misrepresentation, no false statements. The letter of intent clearly stated it was subject to execution. It was a serious offer, not a guarantee. Commercial landlords know this. He'd used similar letters before to string along tenants. Now he was on the receiving end. There was nothing actionable, just humiliation, and a 100-ton vault. The basement sat vacant, and vacant commercial space is expensive. Property taxes don't stop. Maintenance doesn't stop. Insurance doesn't stop. He tried listing it again. New tenants toured the space. Every single one asked the same question. "What's with the vault?" Some thought it was interesting. None wanted the liability. Removing it now it was his problem. Estimates hadn't changed. Still between $750,000 and $1.2 million. But now he couldn't pass that cost on to Marco, because he had claimed ownership. In writing, twice, the bully had outpositioned himself. 3 months later, I visited Marco's new restaurant. Different location, no vault, better foot traffic, cleaner lease. He was busy, busier than before. "How does it feel?" I asked him. He looked around his full dining room. "Like I survived." That's what mattered. The plan wasn't about punishing the landlord. It was about saving Marco. The landlord's losses were collateral to his own greed. For almost a year, the basement remained empty. A for-lease sign faded in the window. Every few months, I'd hear the landlord complain loudly in the lobby about bad market conditions. It wasn't the market. It was the vault. And every time someone mentioned it, I'd say casually, "Seems like a heavy asset to carry." He'd glare at me, but he couldn't undo what he'd done. Structure doesn't reverse easily. Once ownership shifts, it stays shifted. I knew he would sue. Bullies escalate when embarrassed. They don't retreat, they double down. And when Daniel called to tell me the deal had fallen through, I gave it 2 weeks. Took 10 days. Marco called me at 7:12 in the morning. "He filed," he said. His voice was shaking. "Of course he did," I replied. "He's suing for breach, failure to remove the vault. Damages estimated at $900,000. Marco's breathing was shallow. "If I lose this, I'm done." "No," I said calmly. "If you lose this, I'm done." Silence. "What?" "I told you I'd handle it." "Relax." "But the lease?" "I know the lease. That's the difference between panic and structure." Marco saw the lease clause. I saw the landlord's letters. On paper, the landlord's case looked strong. The lease said the tenant must remove the vault. Marco didn't remove the vault. Breach. Damages. End of story. Except that's not how law works. Contracts don't live in isolation. They live in context. And context includes conduct. The landlord had done 3 fatal things. 1. Refused Marco's written demand to remove the vault. 2. Claimed ownership of the vault in writing. 3. Marketed the vault as a landlord-owned asset to a prospective tenant. You cannot assert ownership of something when it benefits you, and deny ownership when it costs you. Courts call that estoppel. Call it poetic. We filed an answer denying breach. Then we filed a counterclaim. Not for millions. Not for drama. For declaratory relief. We asked the court to declare that the landlord had waived the removal clause. The vault was landlord property. Marco had no removal obligation. That reframed the battlefield. Now it wasn't just about damages. It was about ownership. The landlord thought he was suing from strength. He had just stepped into a trap. Here's where things get expensive. In commercial litigation, once pleadings close, discovery begins. And discovery is not optional. It is comprehensive. It is sworn. It is expensive. Marco called me again when he received the first notice. "What's this request for production?" he asked. "Standard," I said. "They want financial records, internal emails, lease history. And we're going to want more." "More?" "Yes." I wasn't dragging the case for billing. I was using the full weight of procedure. There's a difference. When someone files a lawsuit expecting intimidation to carry the day, they rarely anticipate the cost of real litigation. We requested all communications regarding the vault, all marketing materials sent to prospective tenants, all internal memos referencing the LOI, all financial projections tied to vault retention, all prior retroactive common area billing records, all snow removal invoices for the past decade. The landlord's lawyer called me. "Do you really need all this?" he asked. "Yes. Some of this is irrelevant." "Then object." He did. The judge overruled most objections. Because motive matters. And inconsistent conduct matters. And once you claim ownership in writing, everything tied to that claim becomes relevant. Depositions are where bullies unravel. Under oath. On the record. With a court reporter. I deposed the landlord personally. He came in confident. He left sweating. "Did you receive a written demand from Marco to remove the vault?" "Yes." "Did you refuse?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because it's part of the building." "Your building?" "Yes." "Did you state in writing that the vault was integral to the premises?" "Yes." "Did you represent to a prospective tenant that the vault was landlord-owned?" "Yes." "Did you attempt to secure a 10-year lease at 20% above market rent based on that representation?" Pause. "Yes." "And now you are asking this court to declare that the vault was Marco's responsibility?" His lawyer objected. I waited. The landlord looked at me. He knew. Structure. You can't argue with your own words. Litigation isn't comfortable. It drags. Costs. Marco called me almost weekly. "How long is this going to take?" "As long as he wants." "How much is this costing?" "Less than 900,000. That's not funny. It's not supposed to be. The landlord's legal fees were climbing. Depositions, motions, production review, accounting analysis. All because he wanted to bully a tenant into absorbing a $1 million liability. He could have walked away. Instead, he litigated. Bullies hate backing down publicly. So they dig. And digging costs money. One of our discovery requests asked for detailed records of retroactive common area billing. That's where it got interesting. The landlord had billed tenants years after services were performed. In some instances, snow removal charges had no corresponding invoice. He had simply allocated estimated proportional share years later. That's not automatically illegal, but it's aggressive. And when done selectively, it becomes questionable. I didn't accuse him of fraud. I simply asked for documentation. Under oath. In front of a court reporter. Pressure works in more than one direction. After 6 months, his lawyer called again. Would your client consider settlement? We're already in the right position, I said. Remove the vault clause. Mutual release. No. He paused. What do you want? Declaratory judgment. That's when they realized this wasn't about money. It was about ownership. And once ownership is judicially declared, it becomes permanent. Commercial trials aren't cinematic. No shouting. No dramatic objections. Just structured argument. The landlord's lawyer went first. He presented the lease clause. Clear language. Tenant must remove vault. Tenant failed. Breach. Damages. He sat down confidently. I stood up. I didn't argue immediately. I entered exhibits. The written refusal to allow removal. The letter asserting vault ownership. The LOI exchange. The marketing correspondence referencing existing secure vault infrastructure. Then I called the landlord. Under oath. In open court. The same questions from deposition. But this time in front of a judge. Did you refuse removal? Yes. Did you assert ownership? Yes. Did you market the vault as your asset? Yes. And now you want this court to find that it wasn't yours? Silence. The judge leaned forward. You cannot take inconsistent positions to suit convenience, she said. That's judicial estoppel. And it's devastating. The court ruled. The landlord had waived enforcement of the removal clause. The landlord was estopped from denying ownership of the vault. Marco had no obligation to remove it. The landlord was responsible for legal costs. Legal costs in commercial litigation are not small. Between both sides, we estimated his total exposure at $180,000 to $250,000. Not counting vacancy losses. Not counting continued holding costs. Not counting the vault. The vault was now judicially his. Forever. Marco's new restaurant thrived. Better location. Cleaner lease. No legacy clauses. Within a year, he was clearing more profit than before. He paid my fees without complaint. And he slept again. The basement below my office? Still empty. Every prospective tenant asked about the vault. Every one of them walked away. Removing it now? Still close to $1 million. But now undeniably his. A few months after the ruling, I ran into the landlord in the lobby. He looked older. Angrier. You think you won? He said. I didn't think anything, I replied. You cost me a fortune. No, I said calmly. You did. He glared. You lawyers twist everything. I shrugged. You claimed ownership. He didn't respond. Because there was nothing left to argue. Structure doesn't care about emotion. It only cares about position. People assume revenge requires destruction. It doesn't. Sometimes revenge is just holding someone to their own words. He wanted control. He wanted leverage. He wanted to bully a small business into financial ruin. Instead, he became the proud owner of a 100-ton monument to his own greed. And he paid for the privilege. The best part? I never broke a rule. I never lied. I never crossed a legal line. I just let him step over one. Cold. Structural. Permanent.